It was a bright afternoon in early spring, and the college auditorium buzzed with excitement. Students moved in and out of the hall, carrying instruments, setting up microphones, and adjusting lights. The annual music showcase was one of the most awaited events of the year. Everyone wanted to perform, watch their friends, and just be part of the cheerful chaos. Among the crowd was a young man named Ethan. He was in his third year and one of the most confident students in the music department. He could make a piano talk, laugh, and cry all at once. But what made him popular wasn't only his talent, it was his charm and humor. He loved to make people laugh. He was the kind of guy who could turn even a nervous performance into a fun moment. That afternoon, while everyone rehearsed their pieces, Ethan was at the grand piano near the center of the stage. The light from the tall windows fell over the shiny black surface as his fingers ran over the keys, testing notes and chords. His friends sat around joking and clapping. Music filled the hall, bouncing off the walls. At the back of the room, a quiet girl named Clara stood by herself, holding a notebook. She wasn't from the music department, she studied literature, but she loved to listen. She often came to rehearsals sitting quietly in a corner, writing in her journal while others played. She never performed or spoke much, and most people didn't even know her name. Ethan noticed her that day. Between songs, he looked around and spotted the quiet girl watching the piano with thoughtful eyes. Something about her calm face caught his attention. He grinned and without thinking much called out loudly so everyone could hear. "Hey you look like you want to play. Come on, show us what you can do." A few students turned toward Clara and laughed. Some clapped teasingly. It was the kind of joke Ethan often made. Harmless fun, at least in his mind. He didn't mean to embarrass her. He just wanted to lighten the mood. Clara froze. Her face turned slightly red as everyone looked her way. She gave a small smile and shook her head. No, I can't," she said softly. "Come on," Ethan said, still smiling. "One little tune." But Clara just looked down and stepped back, clearly uncomfortable. Ethan laughed, waved it off, and turned back to the piano. The others joined in the laughter, and soon everyone forgot about it. The rehearsal continued, filled with music and chatter. Yet as the day went on, Ethan couldn't help but glance back at Clara. Something about her reaction stayed in his mind. She hadn't looked annoyed or shy, more like she was hiding something. But he brushed off the thought. After all, it was just a joke. That evening, when the actual event began, the auditorium was full. Parents, students, and teachers filled every seat. The stage lights glowed warm and golden. The smell of flowers and fresh programs floated in the air. One by one, the performers came on stage: singers, violinists, guitar players, and pianists. The audience clapped and cheered after every act. Ethan was scheduled near the end of the show. As he waited backstage, he peeked through the curtains and noticed Clara sitting in the audience near the aisle. She wore a simple blue dress and had her hair tied back neatly. She looked quiet as always, but there was something thoughtful in her expression, the kind of calm that hides deep emotions underneath. When his turn came, Ethan walked on stage to loud applause. He bowed with his usual confidence and started playing a lively, upbeat tune. His fingers flew over the keys, the notes bouncing like laughter. The audience clapped in rhythm, enjoying every moment. Ethan loved the attention, the smiles, the energy, the feeling of being in control. After a few songs, he paused and took a sip of water. His friends shouted from the front row, "Play something new. Do something funny." Ethan grinned, always ready for a bit of fun. Then his eyes fell again on Clara, sitting quietly in the third row. Without thinking, he leaned into the microphone and said, "You know what? I think we have someone special in the audience today. She's been watching us rehearse all week, so maybe she can show us what she's got." Laughter spread through the hall. A few people looked around, trying to guess who he was talking about. When Ethan pointed toward Clara, the crowd turned. For a moment, she froze just like before. The lights from the stage made her eyes sparkle, but her expression was unreadable. Some students whispered, "Is she going to do it?" Others chuckled, thinking it was just another one of Ethan's jokes. "Come on," Ethan said, gesturing toward the piano. "Just one song. Don't be shy." Clara stayed still for a moment, and Ethan thought she would refuse again. He even started to move back to the piano, ready to play another song and move on. But then something unexpected happened. Clara stood up. The laughter stopped. Everyone turned to watch as she slowly made her way to the stage. Her steps were calm but sure. Ethan blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected her to actually say yes. When she reached the stage, she smiled politely at him. "Just for a minute," she said softly. Ethan nodded, still half in disbelief. He stepped aside and offered her the piano bench. The audience watched curiously. Some looked amused, some intrigued. It was supposed to be just another playful moment. A shy girl pretending to play for fun. Clara sat down carefully, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands gently on the keys. Her fingers rested there for a long second, as if she was remembering something. The room grew quiet, waiting for her to start. Ethan crossed his arms and leaned against the side of the piano, a playful smile still on his face. But inside he was curious. Something about the way she sat, the calm, focused way, didn't feel like someone who had never played before. The hall, which had been buzzing with noise just a minute ago, now held its breath. The lights were warm and soft on the stage. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, a cough from the back row, the rustle of someone's program page turning. Clara took a deep breath and pressed the first key. A single note rang out, clear and gentle. Then another. Then a small melody began to flow. It was slow at first, simple and careful, but within seconds it grew deeper, stronger, more emotional. The sound filled the air, spreading through every corner of the hall. Ethan straightened, his playful grin fading into surprise. The crowd fell silent. Every note seemed to carry a story, soft, sad, and beautiful. It wasn't a performance. It was like she was speaking through the piano. No one laughed now. No one whispered. Everyone just watched her hands move, graceful and confident, as if the piano was an old friend she hadn't met in years. Ethan stood frozen beside her. He realized in that moment that his joke had turned into something completely different. When the last note faded into silence, Clara lifted her hands slowly. The hall was still quiet, too quiet. For a few long seconds, no one moved. Then someone started clapping. Another followed. And then the whole auditorium erupted in applause. Ethan looked at her, speechless. Clara smiled shyly, stood up, and gave a small bow. There was no pride in her expression, just peace, like someone who had finally let something out that she'd been holding inside for years. As she walked off the stage, Ethan wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a thank you, but the words didn't come. He just watched her disappear into the crowd, the sound of applause still echoing through the hall. That night, long after the lights were turned off and everyone had gone home, Ethan sat alone at the piano. He touched the keys and thought about how quickly a simple joke had turned into one of the most unforgettable moments of his life. He realized then that sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest stories, and all it takes is a single chance or even a careless invitation to let them be heard. Next morning, the college campus was full of whispers. Everyone seemed to be talking about the same thing. The quiet girl from the literature department who had stunned the whole hall with her piano performance. People replayed her song on their phones, passing the recording around, shaking their heads in disbelief. Some said she had trained abroad. Some said she came from a family of musicians. Others thought she was just a natural genius who had never shown her talent before. Nobody really knew the truth, but everyone agreed on one thing. That moment was magical. Ethan, meanwhile, couldn't stop thinking about it. He had barely slept the night before. He kept hearing those notes in his head over and over. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see her sitting there, calm and composed, playing as if the music came from her soul. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly humbled. He had gone on stage with confidence, expecting to entertain people, maybe even show off a little. But she had done something else entirely. She didn't just play. She connected. She didn't seek attention, and yet she had captured every heart in that hall. Ethan walked through the corridor that morning, hearing students excitedly talk about her performance. "Did you see her hands? She didn't even look at the keys," one said. "It was like she was lost in her own world," another replied. He smiled faintly, both proud and guilty at the same time. He spotted her near the cafeteria, sitting at a corner table, sipping tea, her notebook open in front of her. She looked just the same, quiet, focused, and simple. No one would guess she was the person everyone was talking about. For a few seconds, Ethan hesitated. He didn't know what to say to her. Should he apologize for calling her up as a joke? Should he thank her for giving everyone such a moment? Finally, he took a deep breath and walked toward her. "Hey," he said softly, standing near her table. She looked up, surprised but not upset. "Oh, hi," she said with a small smile. "I just wanted to say—" He paused, scratching his head. "That was amazing, really. You were incredible last night." She looked down shyly. "Thank you," she said. "I wasn't planning to play, honestly. I just thought, maybe I should." Ethan laughed nervously. "Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. It was supposed to be a joke. But I'm really glad you did it. You completely silenced us all." She laughed lightly. "I noticed," she said. "It felt strange, though. I've never played in front of so many people before." Ethan's eyes widened. "Wait, seriously? That was your first time performing like that?" She nodded. "I used to play at home for my family, but after they moved away, I stopped for a long time." She paused, her eyes drifting away for a moment. "That piano reminded me of my old one. It just felt like I should play." There was something soft in her voice, something that told him there was a bigger story behind her words. But he didn't ask. He didn't want to push. They talked for a few more minutes, mostly about music, about how different people connect to it, and how it has the power to calm or heal. Ethan found himself listening more than speaking, which was unusual for him. He realized how much depth there was behind her quiet nature. Later that day, as he walked back to his music class, he noticed the professor speaking excitedly to a few students. "We might have found our representative for the inter-college performance next month," the professor said. "That girl from last night, and what was her name again?" "Clara," one of the students replied. Ethan smiled, overhearing it. He thought she definitely deserved it. But when he found her later that afternoon and mentioned it, she shook her head immediately. "Oh no, I can't," she said quickly. "I'm not ready for that. It was just one song. I don't want to perform in competitions." "But you were amazing," Ethan said. "You'd win for sure," she laughed softly. "That's not why I play. I don't want to turn it into a contest. Music is personal for me." Ethan nodded slowly. He admired that. He'd spent years trying to impress audiences, earn applause, and build a name. But for her, it wasn't about being known. It was about expression. That night, as he practiced alone in the music room, he found himself playing differently. He wasn't thinking about speed or perfection anymore. He was trying to feel the emotion behind each note the way she had. For the first time, he understood what it meant to play from the heart instead of just the hands. Days passed, but the memory of that evening stayed alive. Teachers mentioned her in class. Students still shared the video online. It became the most talked about moment of the year. Then one day, the head of the music department invited her to play at a special charity concert organized by the college. It was going to be held at the City Concert Hall, a grand place with hundreds of seats and perfect acoustics. Ethan was also invited to perform a duet piece with another student. When he heard that she had been invited, he couldn't help smiling. Maybe this time the world outside the college would hear her too, but when he asked her if she was going to accept, she hesitated again. "I don't know," she said softly. "I'm scared." "Scared of what?" he asked gently. "Of disappointing people," she said. "Everyone thinks I'm someone special now. But I just played one song. What if I can't do it again?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice calm. "Then don't think about people. Just play like you did before and for yourself." She looked at him for a moment, thoughtful, then smiled faintly. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe I will." The next few weeks went by quickly. The concert date grew closer. Ethan would sometimes pass by the practice rooms and hear faint music coming from one of them. When he peeked through the glass, he'd see her there, sitting alone at the piano, eyes closed, completely lost in the melody. He never interrupted her. He just stood there for a few moments, listening quietly before walking away. Finally, the day of the big concert arrived. The city hall was beautifully decorated, lights glimmering like stars across the stage. The audience was made up of students, professors, families, and guests from different colleges. Ethan performed his duet earlier in the evening. It went well and the crowd cheered. But as soon as his part was done, he found himself waiting eagerly for her turn. When the announcer finally said her name, a hush spread through the hall. Ethan could feel his heart beating faster. She walked onto the stage slowly, wearing a simple white dress, her hair tied loosely. She didn't look nervous, just calm, the same calm she had that first night. She sat down at the grand piano. For a moment, she looked out at the audience, hundreds of faces silent and expectant. Then she closed her eyes and began to play. The first few notes were soft, almost fragile. But then the music grew, flowing, rising, and falling like waves. It was a song full of emotion, full of quiet strength. It wasn't flashy or complicated, but it reached straight into people's hearts. Ethan, sitting backstage, felt a lump in his throat. He had never heard anything like it. She wasn't performing anymore. She was storytelling without words. When the last note ended, the hall went completely silent. You could feel the emotion in the air. Then suddenly applause burst out like thunder. People stood up clapping, cheering, some even wiping away tears. She stood up slowly, bowed with a gentle smile, and stepped back. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from emotion. As she left the stage, she passed Ethan, who was waiting at the side. "That was perfect," he whispered. She smiled softly. "Thank you for making me play that first time," she said. "If you hadn't, I don't think I'd be here today." Ethan chuckled. "No," he said quietly. "Thank you for teaching me what real music sounds like." They shared a small, understanding smile, the kind that doesn't need words. That night, as they walked out of the concert hall, the air was cool, and the city lights shimmered on the streets. Ethan looked up at the stars and thought about how strange life could be, how a joke, a simple moment of teasing, had turned into something so meaningful. He realized that sometimes fate hides greatness in the quietest corners, waiting for someone to accidentally discover it. And when it happens, it changes not just one person's life, but everyone who witnesses it. After that night at the concert hall, everything began to change, quietly at first, then all at once. The performance video started spreading beyond the college campus. Someone had recorded her playing and uploaded it online. Within a few days, thousands of people had watched it. The comments were full of surprise and admiration. People wrote things like, "This girl plays like she's telling a story," and "Her music feels like a warm hug." Ethan saw the video too. He watched it late at night, alone in his room with the lights off and headphones on. Even though he had been there in person, hearing it again through the screen gave him chills. The camera had caught her face clearly, calm, focused, lost in the melody, and every time her hands moved, it looked like poetry in motion. He scrolled through the comments for a long time. There were hundreds of them. Some said they cried while listening. Others said it reminded them of their childhood, their parents, or the people they had lost. It was unbelievable how deeply her music touched so many strangers who didn't even know her name. When he met her at the campus cafe a few days later, she seemed a little overwhelmed. "I didn't expect people to notice," she said, looking down at her cup of tea. Ethan smiled. "You didn't just play a song. You told a story. That's what people felt," she nodded slowly. "It feels strange. I'm happy they liked it, but I didn't do it for that. I just wanted to play again after so long." He could see she meant it. There was no trace of pride in her voice, no excitement about the attention. She seemed calm, even a little unsure of what to do next. Soon the college principal invited her to perform again, this time at a charity event attended by local media and guests from the city's cultural board. It was a big deal. The moment she said yes, the whole music department buzzed with excitement. Teachers offered to help her prepare, and students wanted to accompany her. Ethan noticed, though, that she didn't say much about it. She practiced quietly, often late at night when the campus was empty. Sometimes Ethan would find her sitting alone in the dimly lit music room, eyes closed, playing softly as if the piano was the only thing listening. One night, he knocked on the door, and she looked up. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to interrupt," she smiled faintly. "It's okay. I was just remembering." "Remembering what?" he asked. She paused for a moment. "My father," she said quietly. "He used to sit beside me when I played. He'd tell me to listen to the sound of my heart between the notes." Ethan didn't say anything for a while. He just listened to the soft echo of her words. Then he said gently, "He must have been proud of you." She smiled again, this time a little sad. "He never got to hear me play like this. He passed away before I joined college." There was a silence after that, not awkward, but full of understanding. Ethan sat down beside her on the bench and they played a few soft notes together, without talking. It wasn't a duet, just a shared moment of peace. As the days passed, her confidence grew. The charity event was getting closer, and she began spending more time in the auditorium. Ethan often stayed back to help her set up, test the sound, or simply sit nearby while she practiced. He didn't know why, but he felt responsible somehow, like he had started something important and now he needed to see it through. The night of the charity event finally arrived. The hall was packed with guests, professors, and even a few reporters. The lights were dim, and a soft golden glow fell on the grand piano at the center of the stage. Ethan sat near the front row, his heart beating fast, almost as if he was the one about to perform. When her name was announced, the applause began before she even stepped on stage. She walked out slowly, her face calm, though he could tell from the way her fingers moved that she was nervous. She took her seat, adjusted the bench, and closed her eyes for a moment before touching the keys. The first few notes were gentle, almost hesitant. But then the melody grew, filling the hall with warmth. This time she played something new, something deeper, sadder, but also full of hope. Every chord carried emotion, and every silence between the notes spoke louder than words. The audience sat perfectly still. Even the faint sound of breathing seemed to disappear. Halfway through the performance, Ethan realized something. She wasn't playing just for them. She was playing for someone else, someone far away, maybe even for her father. You could feel it in every rise and fall of the music. It was raw, honest, and heartbreakingly beautiful. When she finished, there was a long pause before the applause came. It started softly, then grew louder and louder until the whole hall was on its feet. People were cheering, clapping, some even wiping tears. Ethan felt his chest tighten with pride. He stood and clapped until his hands hurt. After the show, reporters surrounded her, asking questions about her background, her training, her inspiration. She answered politely, but her eyes kept searching the crowd until they found him. She smiled when she saw him standing at the back, clapping quietly, and he smiled back. Later that night, when most people had left, Ethan found her sitting alone near the piano again. The hall was empty and only a few lights were still on. "You were amazing," he said. "That was even more powerful than last time." She looked up at him and smiled tiredly. "Thank you. I just played what I felt," he nodded. "You know, I think that's why people love your music. You don't try to impress anyone, you just let them feel what you feel." She was silent for a while, then said softly, "I used to be scared of being seen. But now, I think I understand something. When you share what's in your heart, it doesn't make you weak. It makes you connect." Ethan smiled at her words. "That's true," he said. "You taught me that." They sat there for a long time, not talking much. Just two people, the echo of the piano around them, and the soft hum of the empty hall. In the weeks that followed, her name began to appear in local newspapers. A small clip from her performance went viral online. She started getting invitations from nearby colleges and cultural centers to perform. At first, she refused most of them. She didn't want fame or attention. But Ethan encouraged her gently. "You have a gift," he said. "You can touch people with your music. Maybe that's what you're meant to do." So, slowly, she began saying yes. Each performance was different, sometimes small and intimate, sometimes in larger venues, but every time, people left with something changed in their hearts. Ethan was always there, sitting in the audience, supporting her quietly. He had become more than just a fellow musician. He had become her friend, her biggest believer. One evening, after a particularly emotional performance at a cultural event, she turned to him backstage and said, "Do you ever think about how strange it all is? That all of this started because of a joke?" Ethan laughed softly. "Yeah, I still can't believe it. If I hadn't teased you that day, none of this would have happened." She smiled, shaking her head. Maybe it wasn't a joke after all. Maybe it was meant to happen. He looked at her for a moment, thinking about how far she'd come, from the quiet girl in the audience to the woman whose music had touched thousands. "You're right," he said. "Some things are just meant to happen." That night, as they left the hall, she stopped for a moment outside. The sky was clear, and the stars shone brightly above the city. The cool wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint sound of laughter and music from nearby streets. She looked up and whispered, almost to herself, "I think he would have been proud." Ethan didn't need to ask who she meant. He just nodded and said, "He definitely is." As they walked away together, the echo of her song still lingered in the air. gentle, timeless, unforgettable. And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew that something deep had changed in them. She had found her voice. He had found his meaning, and together, without even realizing it, they had created a story that no one would forget. Months passed, and life slowly began to change for both of them. Her music had started traveling far beyond the college walls now. Local newspapers had written about her. A short video of her performance had crossed 1 million views online. She was no longer just the quiet girl who surprised everyone. People now called her the pianist with a soul. She received messages from strangers, people she had never met, thanking her for her music. Some said it helped them through lonely nights. Some said it gave them peace. A few even said her melody had inspired them to start learning the piano again. It was strange for her. She wasn't used to attention. She still lived her simple routine: classes in the morning, writing in the afternoon, and music in the evenings. But the world around her had started changing. People treated her differently now. Whenever she walked across campus, students turned and whispered. Some smiled at her, some asked for pictures, and some even requested her autograph. At first, she didn't know how to handle it. She would smile politely, thank them, and quietly slip away. But deep down, she missed the calm anonymity she once had, when she could just sit in the back of a room and listen to others play. Ethan, on the other hand, felt proud every time he saw her success. But he also felt something else, and something he didn't quite understand. It wasn't jealousy exactly, but there was a quiet ache somewhere inside him. He had always been confident in his own talent, but after hearing her, he realized there was a different kind of greatness, one that couldn't be measured by skill or technique. One evening, he sat alone in the practice room, playing softly, but nothing felt right. The notes sounded empty. His fingers were fast, but his heart wasn't in it. He stopped midway and sighed. When she walked in a few minutes later carrying her notebook, she noticed his frustration. "You okay?" she asked gently. He smiled faintly. "Just tired, I guess. My music doesn't sound like it used to." She tilted her head. "Maybe you're thinking too much. You taught me something once, to play with feeling, not just fingers." He chuckled. "Funny how that advice came from you in the first place." Soon, the college principal invited her to perform again, this time at a charity event attended by local media and guests from the city's cultural board. It was a big deal. The moment she said yes, the whole music department buzzed with excitement. Teachers offered to help her prepare, and students wanted to accompany her. Ethan noticed, though, that she didn't say much about it. She practiced quietly, often late at night when the campus was empty. Sometimes Ethan would find her sitting alone in the dimly lit music room, eyes closed, playing softly as if the piano was the only thing listening. One night, he knocked on the door, and she looked up. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to interrupt," she smiled faintly. "It's okay. I was just remembering." "Remembering what?" he asked. She paused for a moment. "My father," she said quietly. "He used to sit beside me when I played. He'd tell me to listen to the sound of my heart between the notes." Ethan didn't say anything for a while. He just listened to the soft echo of her words. Then he said gently, "He must have been proud of you." She smiled again this time. They both laughed softly. But as the laughter faded, there was a quiet understanding between them, something unspoken, like a line of music hanging in the air. As her popularity grew, she began receiving invitations from bigger stages, art festivals, charity events, and even a local television program. Each time she would ask Ethan if she should go. Each time he told her yes. "Don't hold back," he said. "People need to hear you." Still, he couldn't ignore the strange emptiness that came whenever she was away performing. The music department felt quieter without her. The evenings seemed longer. He realized that her presence had changed the way he looked at everything: music, success, even himself. One afternoon, after a small performance in the city, she came back to campus looking tired but happy. She found him sitting near the fountain, sketching some notes on paper. "I missed this place," she said softly, sitting beside him. "The city stage was too bright, too loud. I like it here better." He looked up from his notebook and smiled. "That's because this place knows your story. The city only knows your name." She thought about that for a moment. Maybe that's true. But I still want to play there again. Not for fame, but for the feeling. When I play, it feels like time stops. It's the only thing that feels real. He nodded, listening closely. Then you should keep going, he said. As long as it feels real. Weeks turned into months. Her performances became more frequent, and soon she was balancing her classes with practice, interviews, and travel. Sometimes Ethan wouldn't see her for days. He missed their quiet evenings by the piano, where words weren't needed. One evening, while scrolling through social media, he saw an interview clip of her on a local news channel. The host asked her about the first time she played in public. That night when Ethan had called her on stage as a joke, she laughed softly on camera. Yes, it started with a joke, she said. But that moment changed everything for me. I think it was meant to happen. The interviewer smiled. Do you still talk to the person who called you up that night? She paused, smiling thoughtfully. Of course, she said. He's one of my closest friends. He's the reason I found my courage. Ethan felt warmth spread through him as he listened to her words, but somewhere deep down a small ache remained. He was happy for her, genuinely happy, but he couldn't ignore the distance growing between them. Success, even when pure and humble, can sometimes build invisible walls. Not out of pride, but out of time, schedules, and the simple pull of life moving forward. One late evening, he found her in the music hall again, practicing quietly under the dim lights. She looked tired, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders, her eyes heavy from lack of sleep. You should rest, he said softly. She smiled without stopping her hands. I can't. There's a performance next week and I'm not ready yet. He walked closer, leaning against the piano. You've been playing nonstop for days. You're more than ready. She looked up at him and sighed. I just don't want to disappoint anyone. He frowned. You're not here to please anyone, remember? You're here because you love it. She stopped playing. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then she said quietly, Sometimes I forget that. He reached out and gently closed the piano lid. Then maybe it's time you remember. They sat in silence for a while. She rested her head against the piano, her eyes half closed. Do you ever feel like the thing you love starts to control you? She asked softly. He nodded slowly. Yeah. Sometimes it feels like you start running after something that used to chase you. She looked at him, and for a moment, neither of them said anything more. There was just the quiet hum of the night, the faint smell of wood and music sheets, and the soft glow of the piano lamp. A few days later, the big performance arrived, the one she had been preparing for. It was in a large auditorium in the city, attended by musicians, critics, and fans. Ethan went too, sitting quietly among the crowd. When she walked on stage, she looked calm but distant, like she was carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. The music started beautifully, but halfway through, something shifted. A note slipped just slightly. Her fingers hesitated for a moment. Then she continued, finishing the piece gracefully. But Ethan could feel it. Her heart wasn't in it this time. The audience still clapped loudly, but he knew she wasn't satisfied. After the performance, he found her backstage, sitting alone with her hands clasped tightly. She looked up when she saw him, her eyes tired. I played it perfectly, she said quietly, but it didn't feel right. Ethan sat beside her. Because it wasn't yours this time, he said softly. It was theirs. She stared at the floor for a long time, then nodded slowly. I think I've lost it, she whispered. He shook his head. No. You just need to remember why you started. She looked up at him with a faint, grateful smile. You always say the right things, he smiled back. Only because I learned them from you. That night on the ride back, she sat by the window watching the city lights blur by. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but her eyes were thoughtful. She knew he was right. Somewhere between the applause and the pressure, she had forgotten the simple joy that once made her play. When they reached campus, she turned to him before getting off the bus. Thank you, she said softly. For reminding me what matters, he smiled gently. Always. That night she didn't go home right away. She went straight to the old music room, the same one where everything had started. The room was dark except for the moonlight coming through the windows. She sat at the piano, touched the keys, and began to play. No audience, no cameras, no applause, just her and the music, and this time it felt right again. Outside, Ethan walked past the window and stopped for a moment, hearing the soft melody drift through the night. He smiled to himself, feeling peace in his heart. He didn't go inside. He didn't need to, because he knew she had found her way back. Time moved quietly after that night. The season changed, the air grew cooler, and leaves began to fall across the campus paths. The days were shorter now, but somehow they both felt lighter. She had started playing again, not for anyone else, not for fame, not for applause, but for herself. Sometimes late at night she would sit at the old piano room, letting her fingers wander freely. The music that came out was softer now, more peaceful, like someone who had finally made peace with their own heart. Ethan often sat outside the room, listening. He never went in unless she called him. It had become their quiet ritual. She played, he listened. No words needed. Her new calm began to reflect in everything she did. She was smiling more now, laughing easily, talking a little more. But there was also a quiet maturity in her eyes, the kind that only comes when someone has walked through both light and shadow. One afternoon, the college principal called her to his office. When she came out, Ethan was waiting in the hallway. She looked at him with a small, surprised smile. "They've invited me to perform at the National Youth Music Festival," she said softly. "In the capital city." Ethan blinked in surprise. "That's huge. That's like the biggest stage for young musicians." She nodded slowly. "It's a lot to take in." "I didn't expect it," he grinned. "You deserve it. This is what all those nights of practice were for." She smiled, but there was a hint of nervousness in her expression. "It feels different this time," she said quietly. "Bigger. Scarier." He looked at her for a moment and said, "You've already played in front of thousands. What's different?" She paused. "Before I was playing for people who knew me, for our college, our city. But this time it's a new world. They won't know my story. They'll just hear my music." He smiled gently. "Then let them. The story is already in your music." For the next few weeks, she practiced harder than ever. The whole campus supported her. Professors offered guidance, students gathered to listen, and Ethan helped her with every detail, from choosing the right piece to making sure she got enough rest. But deep inside, he knew something was changing. This wasn't just another performance. This was a turning point. He could feel it. The day finally came. The National Festival was held in a massive auditorium in the capital. Thousands of people, bright lights, famous judges, and an air of nervous excitement everywhere. She had never seen such a grand stage before. Ethan traveled with her as part of the college delegation. They arrived a day early for rehearsals. The city was buzzing, full of young artists from across the country. Singers, instrumentalists, dancers. Everyone looked confident, dressed perfectly, carrying years of training and ambition. She looked around quietly, feeling small among them. But when she sat at the piano for the sound check, something changed. The moment her fingers touched the keys, the noise of the world disappeared again. It was just her and the music. Ethan watched from a distance, his heart swelling with pride. He knew she was ready. The next evening, the auditorium was full. The performances before her were impressive, flawless, professional, technical. The judges nodded, took notes, and the audience clapped politely. But when her name was called, the energy in the hall shifted. She walked onto the stage wearing a simple dress, her hair tied back. No flashy jewelry, no grand entrance, just quiet confidence. She bowed to the audience and sat at the piano. Ethan, sitting among the crowd, leaned forward slightly, holding his breath. The first note rang out, soft and pure. Then another. Slowly the melody unfolded, delicate yet powerful. Her fingers moved gently, but each sound carried emotion, depth, and truth. The music rose and fell like a tide, telling a story that words could never describe. People stopped whispering. Cameras stopped clicking. Even the judges leaned back in silence. It was as if time stood still. For those few minutes, the whole hall belonged to her, and to the music that filled it. It wasn't loud or complicated. It was honest. It came from a place deep inside her heart, where love and loss and hope had all blended into one. Ethan watched, his eyes glistening. He remembered the first time she had played, that day when he'd teased her in front of everyone. He could still see her nervous smile, the trembling hands that later transformed into confidence. And now she was here, owning one of the biggest stages in the country. When the final note faded, there was complete silence for a few seconds. The kind of silence that feels sacred. Then came the applause, thunderous, long, unending. People stood on their feet. The judges clapped. Some even wiped their eyes. She stood, bowed gracefully, and smiled. Not proud, not overwhelmed, just at peace. Backstage, Ethan met her with tears in his eyes. "You did it," he said, his voice shaking slightly. She smiled softly. "We did it," he shook his head. "No, you did this. You found your way." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe," she said quietly. "But if you hadn't pushed me that night, I might never have touched that piano again." They both smiled. No more words were needed. Later that night, after the results were announced, she had won, of course. They sat outside the auditorium, watching the city lights shimmer across the horizon. The air was cool and everything felt still. "It doesn't feel real," she said softly. "It's real," he said, "and it's only the beginning." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the streetlights. "Do you think things will change now?" He smiled. "Everything changes eventually, but I think you'll always stay the same where it matters." She smiled faintly. "I hope so." When they returned to campus a few days later, she was welcomed like a hero. There were banners, flowers, even a small celebration arranged by students. But she didn't stay long. A few weeks later, she received offers to study at a conservatory abroad. It was a dream opportunity, one that she couldn't ignore. When she told Ethan, he felt a pang in his chest, though he tried to hide it. "That's amazing," he said with a smile. "You have to go. You'll grow even more there." She looked at him carefully. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Absolutely. You were meant for this." The day she was leaving, he came to the station to see her off. The air was filled with noise, announcements, people, trains coming and going, but between them everything felt quiet. She stood by the door of the train holding her small suitcase. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. He smiled. "You already did, every time you played." She laughed lightly, her eyes glistening. "You'll still play, right? Promise me you won't stop." He nodded. "I'll play. Maybe not like you, but I'll play." The train whistle blew. She looked at him one last time. "Goodbye," she said, her voice gentle. "See you soon," he replied, even though both of them knew it might be a long time. The train started moving, slowly at first, then faster. She leaned out for a second, waved, and then she was gone. Just like that. Ethan stood there for a long time, watching until the train disappeared completely. Then he smiled to himself, a quiet, bittersweet smile. Years passed. Seasons changed. Life moved forward. Ethan finished his studies and began teaching music at a local school. He still played the piano every day, not for shows but for peace. Sometimes, late at night, he would remember her. The sound of her music, the calm in her eyes, the lesson she had unknowingly taught him. That real music doesn't come from talent. It comes from the heart. One evening, while scrolling through videos online, he saw her name again. She was performing at a world-famous concert hall overseas. The hall was full and the audience was silent, waiting. He clicked on the video and within seconds, the familiar melody began. The same soft, emotional tune she had once played years ago in that small college auditorium. He sat back, listening, smiling through tears. She had become everything she was meant to be. And yet in that melody he could still hear the same simplicity, the same truth. When the music ended, he whispered to himself, "You did it." And in that quiet room it almost felt like the sound of the piano answered back. Gentle, warm and alive, because some connections never fade. Some moments last forever, and sometimes one small act, even one made as a joke, can change not just one life but two, in ways neither could ever imagine.